Welcome back, everybody, to the Colonials football pregame show. As always, I'm your host, Haiden Haley, and sitting right in front of me is my brother and my co-host, Davin Haley. We have a great show planned for you today after a great week of sports, actually. Colonials won, Eagles won, Sixers looking like a pretty good team in the NBA, a force to be reckoned with. We're going to talk about all these guys in a minute, but for now, breaking news for the 2024 high school football season. The Plymouth White Marsh Colonials will be joining their league opponents, Cheltenham and Wissahickon, in the 6A conference. According to the athletic director, this change was made not just due to the increase in student population predicted, but due to the ever-growing football program and competitiveness that it offers. So, Davin, I'm just kind of curious what you have to think about this. You know, we've been going back about this for a while now, how, Cheltenham and Wissahickon have been in 6A and how the Colonials rightfully belong there with them. But these teams have kind of fallen off and not really been able to keep up with the pressure and the good competition that 6A has to offer. So we know the Colonials can compete, but how do you think they're going to be able to handle 6A next season?
Well, it's great that they're up there, and like you said, a lot of the other teams that are in 6A are not able to compete anymore.
Yep.
At the stage that they are, and the Colonials, I think, they've been able to compete. I think even before last year,
some 6A teams already in the past couple seasons and have done well.
They've clearly they've clearly proven themselves worthy.
Absolutely,
and I think it's great that they finally got their chance.
So what I think is interesting though is Cheltenham and Wissahickon, very big schools. Cheltenham drives in a lot of recruiting. So does Upper Dublin, which is 5A. We don't really have that here. We're a lot of homegrown talent, but we do have a great football program down at Pee Wee level, and middle school is doing a nice job. So, that's I think what we lack in joining 6A is that recruiting factor. But if we could just continue to pop out great coaching, great plays, and it seems like these guys know kind of know the high school plays even at like a young level, which just shows that they kind of run similar plays no matter the age, we're going to be just fine, but I would say that is kind of what we lack. So if they're trying to hope to bring that in, I mean, an ever-growing student population, you think there'd be a couple football gems in there. Obviously, moving up to 6A, that's probably what they're predicting, and they're probably going to continue to upgrade facilities and make the stadiums bigger. So all good things coming from that. I think it drives in a little more money too. Now moving on, Eagles had probably their biggest game of the season on Sunday afternoon. Not just opponent. The Cowboys aren't very good, but just that pressure. Probably the game that defines the NFC East, in my opinion. I always think, especially Cowboys at Eagles, because Dallas. I hate Dallas, but I think it's a pretty tough environment to play in indoors, so if you don't win in Dallas, it's not that big a deal. Eagles usually make it close. Eagles won, though, in a heartbreaker, honestly. It came down to the very end with a lot of penalties, a lot of injuries, but they hung on just like I kind of thought they would. I was hoping they would. And, just winning by 5 points against your NFC rival. What more could you want? They didn't really make a ton of mistakes. I mean, it just kind of that very end. It was a good game. Really, I mean, that's what it was. I'd say the biggest part was that Dallas Goedert injury, though, and I think you have a little bit on that for us, Davin. Here we are 3 days later. What do you have on that?
Yeah, well, as of a few articles that have been written, a lot of people are thinking 4 to 6 weeks is probably the time that he's gonna recover. A lot of doctors are saying that it takes what happened to him around the forearm. It takes a lot faster than you think it will to heal. And so depending, especially because we have the bye week coming, this week, it just depends on, how he's feeling.
Right.
But it also just depends on the games. If it's going to be a big game, we might want Dallas for this. But if it's going to be against someone like, I don't know, the Giants, Commanders, whatever. Well, we've already played them twice, but you might not want Dallas
to risk it.
Yeah, to risk getting injured again, especially if it may be before the playoffs, depending on how long he's out for.
Well, that's what Sirianni said. I believe it was yesterday that he just wants him ready for the playoffs, just like he wants all his guys ready. Because the Eagles they're a playoff team. They are. They're 1 through 7. I think they're more towards that one end of the spectrum, but they're definitely making the playoffs, even if they get the injury bug and fall all the way down. If they can be healthy in the playoffs, no matter what seed they are, they have just as good a chance as anyone to make it to the Super Bowl.
Well, Hurts has been playing on that knee for about
Right.
3 to
This
4
bye week is
weeks.
huge for him. Absolutely
Yeah,
huge.
he's definitely got to get some rest. But I mean, he does not want to fall victim to an injury, even if
Right.
he's already injured.
Anything
He's
worse.
not going to come down with anything. He'll limp off the field. Next play, he's going to come in. I mean, he does not. It's either he hates Marcus Mariota and doesn't want him to get minutes, or he just loves playing football and wants to stay on the field as long as possible.
Well, I think he honestly just wants to win.
He wants to win himself.
Right.
You know, he wants to win as a team, but he himself wants to be a winner.
Well, he's such a team player. I mean, he is such a captain. He always tries to make the best play possible, especially with all the options he has, and that's not very common in some quarterbacks that we have these days that we see in the league. But Hurts just has so many weapons. He even has himself as a weapon. But all the different combinations they could run with all three of their wide receivers, sometimes putting in a couple of different running backs in there, and then he could run it himself. He has all the right pieces to make the right plays at the right time. So,
well, here's some food for thought. I think that's how the saying goes. It's do you think Hurts might not want to wind up like Carson Wentz? Starting quarterback gets injured in time for the playoffs, and what's going to happen if you make the Super Bowl? Does Hurts want to stay as that winner? And I mean, I'm not saying that he's selfish, wants to be the hero of the team or whatever, but he wants to stay with the Eagles. He doesn't want to get bad impressions or anything. And he clearly wants to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He wants to be number one.
So what's interesting about that is the same year that Carson had all that, I guess drama, so to speak, Jalen Hurts was going through a similar thing actually at Alabama. Only a month before the Eagles win the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts gets pulled in the third quarter for none other than Tua Tagovailoa to come in and save Alabama's championship hopes and wins. And Tua actually threw that game-winning ball to none other than Devontae Smith. So I just thought that was interesting. But I remember watching that game, and even like his interview after, he was just happy they won. He was just happy they won. He knew that whole season was his. He was the whole reason they made it to that football championship. And, that was a kind of defining moment for Tua. Saban made Tua the starter the following season, but then Tua went down with an injury, and Hurts had to come in and save the SEC championship game for them. So he's already been in that moment. I don't really think there's any quarterback on the Eagles that, if he does get injured, could take over his spot, kind of like Nick Foles for Carson Wentz, because I just don't think that who do we have? Like Carson Strong's like our fourth string, and then Mariota's our second. I just don't really think Marcus Mariota could have a Nick Foles-esque season.
No, I don't think he will either.
So I think if he gets hurt, we probably lose somewhere, maybe in the second round of the playoffs, if it comes down to that. But, if someone does get hot and win us a Super Bowl instead of Jalen, he's on that 5-year deal. And I just think he's much more of a controlled player. And I really like the way he handles tough situations, things he says in post-game interviews. And, if you've seen any interviews with him prior to his NFL career, just talks about his dad and how his dad really coached him for these big moments, being his middle school and high school football coach back in Houston. And it's just kind of the idea, like, you can't get mad at me or yourself. That's just the way things kind of shook out, and you have to just be better the next time. Yeah. Whether it was on you or someone else, like everyone could just collectively be better. I just think like everyone can always, and whether you win or lose, try to come out from that situation better. And I think the Eagles have been doing that for the past couple seasons that he's been under the quarterback position for us.
Yeah, I mean, it hurts. Honestly, the whole Eagles team knows how to stay cool under that kind of pressure, And
that's what he brings.
Yeah.
It's not just every play. A.J. Brown, I think you could look back to that week 2 thing with him being, sorry to cut you off, but him kind of being a little furious not getting the ball. And now he's had like 6 straight games, 125 plus 2 touchdowns. So, it's that leadership that he brings, I think, is so important. Now, what were you saying?
Well, yeah, just the whole team kind of stays cool.
Right.
I mean, we have...
It's because of him, not because of them. That was my point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have one of the best lines I think we have the best line in the league. Offensive line is great, If you're making some of these, like, all-time Eagles players, like, you'll have Mailata, Kelsey, Johnson, all in that lineup. just because they're so great. They're generational players right there. And on the receiving, like Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. I don't know if you saw against Dallas, they did the recreation of Dwayne Wade and LeBron James.
Yeah, it's just
doing the slam dunk, and
that friendly energy.
They are, I think, the best receiving duo.
Yeah, probably
in the league. I mean,
as of now,
there's not too many.
Before the season, it was predicted a couple other duos were supposed to be better than them, but right now it's.
And people say, I'd rather have Diggs over Brown. I'd rather
like that Tyreek Hill Waddle duo.
I'd rather have Hill over Brown. I'd rather have
Jamar
Jefferson,
Chase,
Chase, whatever. And I think maybe I could see some points if they would rather have Jefferson over Brown because of route running and because of speed. Right. But then you have Devontae Smith on the other hand. You have if you can't find Brown, you find Smith, and vice versa. And that's what makes the Eagles, especially for receiving, so great. It's that there's so everyone's just great. You could give the ball to Swift. He can run. He runs amazing with the ball.
Absolutely.
Or give it to Gainwell. He could gain well, quite literally, give you a few extra yards.
Absolutely. Now, another Philly team playing just about as hot as the Eagles right now, with only one loss, I believe, still hopefully trying to keep that streak going later this week, is none other than the Philadelphia 76ers. We went to the game this past Saturday, had a great time, watched them blow out the Suns by a couple, I think it was around 15 points for that matinee game. So, Davin, I'm just kind of curious what you think under this Nick Nurse coaching and, the great role players that Philly now has, and Kelly Oubre and Furkan Korkmaz coming off the bench now, and I think even Robert Covington being very effective for this Philly team, obviously helping out Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, and Embiid, showing why he was last year's MVP. What do you like, what do you not like, and how long you think they could keep this hot streak going?
Well, I got 3 words for you here. Kelly Oubre Jr.
Absolutely.
Now,
I love this man, averaging like 29 points a game as a Sixer.
I mean, it's not only him, of course, but think about it. You expect everything from MVP Joel Embiid, right? You're going to expect Tyrese Maxey. Everyone's thinking he's going to have a breakout season, and he has been so far.
Tobias playing for his contract.
Tobias, like you said, he's playing for his contract. Maxey, I think he's going to win Most Improved Player.
He should.
He better.
I think it's probably between him and the other Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah.
Those two are playing well.
And then you get to players that we didn't really expect. So Kelly Oubre being the biggest one. He came from Charlotte, which is not a very popular team in the league, to say the least.
And I think that brought him down.
Yeah, and I was thinking he's going to come on this team as a role player because we're going to have, Joel. And it's kind of like last year. We had a lot of role players because all Doc Rivers wanted to focus on was Embiid
and occasionally Harden. Yeah.
And he didn't even care about Maxey most of the time, which is what made me and a lot of other fans very upset. Yeah. Nick Nurse has been a great coach because he wants every guy to have their moment with the ball. He said it in plenty of interviews that he wants to give the ball to everybody, give them opportunities. When we traded Harden,
getting some assets and a lot of
weeks
picks
ago. Yeah. When we traded Harden last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't remember.
Yeah.
We got Robert Covington, who we all knew wasn't going to be as good as he was when he first was
but
on
I think
he
fits into this team perfectly now.
Defensively, I mean, we were all expecting PJ Tucker in the league had great defense prior to being a Sixer. I thought he had great defense. He was able to put a lot of pressure on the ball. When the Suns played the Sixers on Saturday, Covington was pressuring Durant amazingly. I was very surprised by his defense. I mean, I think he got a lot bigger from before he was on from when he was on the Sixers.
Him and Pat Bev did a great job under him.
Pat Bev, he's a defensive animal. I mean,
he's a great piece.
And we've even seen ever since Saturday, Nicholas Batum, who we signed, also came up big with some threes.
Yeah.
So everyone has been really good. I think Nick Nurse's coaching has been some of the best coaching we've seen from the Sixers ever.
I was going to say, you look at, just to kind of paint a picture of this offense for you, Maxey's bringing up the ball, but Tobias Harris, like we said, compete for his contract, he's touching the ball at least twice a possession, and then, you're going to run it through Embiid and all, but everyone really getting a chance to get the ball, and they have great ball movement, so, I trust anyone, especially on that starting 5, to make an open shot, and with the talent they have in that starting 5, you're going to get a lot of open shots. So as long as they go in, this team has a great chance to make the conference finals, which everyone would love to happen, kind of complete the process, so to speak.
Yeah, I just want to bring up something that you said. You said moving through with the ball, right? You said Harris to, Embiid or Maxey, whatever. And that's something that the Sixers rarely did last year.
Yeah.
I saw a play from last year against the Celtics in the playoffs. It was where Maxey would drive, swing the ball out to like Harris, swing it to Melton, back to Embiid. Embiid kicked it right out to Harris, who had a corner three. That was amazing ball movement, which is not seen in the league as much because you have these star players that are just able to score wherever. Think of Jokic, for instance, right? I mean, the guy can pass amazing, but then that leads to a score. There's no good ball circulation. And for a team like the Sixers, that has been very important. And I'm never gonna stop talking about Nick Nurse. He's made it clear that that's what the Sixers have been doing. And even against the loss in Milwaukee for the first game of the season, it was a close game. The very Sixers close. Just couldn't get the lead up enough, and Damian Lillard has the clutch shooting. But there's been everyone's had a role, and Harris is now able. Last year, nobody knows how many points he was averaging. It was very small. It was probably under 10, honestly, per game. Now, I mean, he had a double-double on Saturday, I believe. Yep. And so did like 3 other players. And it's been great to see what the Sixers are able to do this year. And I think that they're going to go far, maybe not finals far, but I think it's going to be far enough for Embiid to want to stay and like the team.
Right, and that's what we need.
And for Maxey to want to stay, not take any bigger contracts with, more money for other cities.
Mm-hmm. So everyone competing for their own personal reasons on the Sixers, and, still a bunch of games left to go to see if they can finally get to the promised land. Now, getting into the steak and potatoes of our show, so to speak, let's talk a little bit about the Colonials. Had a great game on Friday, but before we get more in-depth on that, had a chance to talk with the starting defensive lineman for our Colonials, Tayshaun Johnson, once again. So here's that audio and what he thought about the game on Friday right now. Would you say overall you guys handled business successfully on Friday?
Yeah, 100%.
Over the past calendar year, what characteristics changed both on and off the field for Haiden to go from backup quarterback to QB1?
Ooh, I just say he has more confidence now, and he speaks up and talks more. So like when we have our team meetings, we need a pep talk. We go to Haiden, QB1 last year, or in the beginning of the season, he would stay in the back and kind of stay hidden. So his confidence is a lot more now.
On Friday, you guys will be taking on Bayard Rustin for the second time in the playoffs. So will you guys be coming into this one with more of a personal edge than usual, or does that not really change much for you guys?
We will come in with more personal. A lot of our guys lost against them 2 years ago in the 3rd round. So everybody's kind of taking it personal, and we want to win by a lot and blow them out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tayshaun. Good luck this week.
Thank you.
Always great to cherish that time with Tayshaun as season is winding down. No matter when we win or lose, but we should be able to win. I'm thinking the next couple games, especially with how this team's playing. Now, the biggest story is Everett Baker was not injured on Friday. Currently is not injured. Is practicing, but you might be thinking to yourself right now, why isn't he playing? Well, that's because he transferred a little late. Unfortunately, I actually just thought he was a student and just played football this year, but he was a transfer from Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic starts and ends earlier than Plymouth Whitemarsh does. Tayshaun said he saw him and met with Everett around June of last year, maybe even late May, so to speak. Last year, saw him tour, got to meet with him, great guy, and thought that was plenty of time for him to transfer. But the catch is, this goes for all sports, if you transfer before or after a certain deadline, you can't play in playoff games. You can play regular season games, but you can't play playoff games. And, I guess that's, kind of break up a strategy of, teams getting over the hump in the playoffs. I don't know if that's a scandal that's been recently used, but that's where my mind goes for this. So apparently, I would think that's plenty of time for him to transfer, especially if they're going to end, Catholic's going to end, early June, late May. And we go all the way into, sometimes mid-June at the latest. So I'm not really sure what the cutoff is, but pretty much just as he's not playing. Really no need to panic, though, as the Colonials look just fine. Luke Winterbottom back in full health, kind of rested that knee over the past couple weeks. Nazai doing Nazai Boggs things, incorporating Andrew Iannozzi into that running game, and Marcus Lafredo. And all 4 of these guys playing to their true potential. Obviously some guys will do better than others. Cough, cough, Nazai. But it doesn't look like much of a problem. And when we talked to Nazai, he was saying how it is, Everett being just such a great mind to have on the sideline, and how he helps out in practices and just what he brings. So it doesn't seem like that this was any roadblock for them. I mean, if you watch any Colonials games towards the end of the beginning and the end of the season, they didn't really utilize him as much. The touchdowns that he scored were just on defensive blown coverages by the other teams, and he scored like a 60-yard bomb. But they kind of used him towards the middle and tried to fade him in and fade him out of this offense, which was very smart. As we didn't know he wouldn't play playoffs, but like I said, team's looking fine. Just real quick, Davin, your thoughts on Friday's game without Everett, and how you think they're going to kind of finish up without their second back.
Well, the Colonials won 42-7.
Absolutely.
So 7 points off from my prediction.
Yeah, 7 points off in each direction on my end too. So let's see if we get back with these predictions for this coming week.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, it was a great game. For Plymouth Whitemarsh, and it seemed that the absence of Everett, as unfortunate as it is to have him not playing, it did not impact them as much as I thought.
Well, no, I thought you were going the other way, because especially on that first drive, they turned it over. The Colonials, they had it, and they I forget if it was on downs, or remember what I'm talking about? They move it down the field, but they do not. It was on 4th and short. They don't convert that 4th and short. I think they went with a little screen pass, and they couldn't get it. And that's when I was like, all right, this is that Haparow defense we were talking about. But Haparow comes down. They don't even get past the 50. I think they tried to turn it over on downs, because that's what we talked about. They had to make a statement. They didn't get it, and from that point on, Colonials in short field, and they just ran it down the field and got into the goal zone. And I think 7 yards out, and Luke Winterbottom punches in a touchdown for us.
Well, it's just the fact that in the beginning of the season, like Tayshawn was saying, they were not using Everett as much, so then they could kind of feel how it would be.
Right, that's why I said fade him in and then fade him out of the offense.
And so, I mean, it was great when we had him, but a lot of plays that we saw, I mean, we were looking at a play prior to recording, which is where they used Everett as a fake. Like, they used him as a decoy.
Yes.
Which, I mean, that was a very good play, but you can replace him with anybody. You can replace it with Luke Winterbottom. You don't even need to put
anyone
in a
that draws
back
attention,
or a wide receiver. Or
right.
Anybody.
So it was that
one of your defensive ends.
They used it on back-to-back scoring drives inside the 20. It was against that game against Wissahickon, which was the big game that they pretty much needed to secure the conference. And it starts out with like a 7-yard run, pretty much, and they have some motion going left with Nazai cutting across behind Caden and Everett dicing with him, and then Luke coming back the other way. And I forget who they handed it off to. I think it was maybe Lafredo. And those are guys that are drawing a ton of attention, especially they've been running that pitch play to Nazai a lot, right? So you get teams thinking you're going this way, that way,
off their whole direction,
right? And then who's wide open?
Yeah, and one of Marcus Lafredo.
Absolutely.
And as soon as one of safety or defensive end whatever turns around, they see Lafredo, who's like 5 yards in front of him. He's getting that ball immediately.
So then we go back to that other play. When they need the score to break 40. And this is what I love the most. And this is what they need. They need to do this more, especially playing a team like RUSTIN, who's going to try to run all over you. And then when if you win that game, play Chester, who's a big beast in this 5A, where they used Nazai and Luke and Everett and pushed them all one way and had Lafredo out on the wideout spot, and then made it him coming in faking like he was going to block. But then he slipped through, and everyone's eyes is looking at Caden to pitch the ball. He still has it, so then Lafredo wide open in the end zone. And he has a great arm, beautiful pass, and Lafredo's got some great hands. So those two things together is what has to get the Colonials over this third round exit that we've kept seeing. Using the arm, getting the ball in the air, and they've had a large amount of passing touchdowns this season, so many more than we've seen in the past. And Lafredo leading the team in receiving yards per game at 27.5. I think that's a great number for him.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not expecting to see, over the past few games, probably ever since like Wissahickon, I've seen kind of a shift from Plymouth Whitemarsh, and it may just be the difficulty of the teams that they've been playing, defensively strong especially. But instead of giving the ball off to Nazai, which we still do, but letting him run 70 yards downfield, he might get stopped, and it may take us 2 to 3 downs to get a first down. But the Colonials have kind of been inching up the field, I found, getting the first downs when necessary. And then, they would run a more sophisticated play, 20 yards out or so.
Right.
Which is that pass play that we saw, like the fakes, or they just pitch it off to someone, they'll run it in on one of the corners to the end zone. And that's been shown here for the stats. Plymouth Rush had 19 first downs against Hatboro, and Hatboro only had 6.
Right.
So, everything in Plymouth Whitemarsh, total plays, PW 43, Hatboro 37, right?
Wow.
Plymouth Whitemarsh 19 first downs, Hatboro 6. Penalties, PW only had 1, which cost them only 5 yards.
Okay.
Hatboro had 4, which cost them 35.
Yeah.
So the Plymouth Whitemarsh, we've seen, had some trouble with penalties when they played, Cheltenham around then.
That one penalty, I remember that. It was a little false start, nothing too bad, especially in the playoffs. You'd expect that energy or those jitters, but 1 for 5 yards. I mean, especially early in the game, to not get another one, for the entire rest of the game that's huge. That's huge for this team.
We haven't seen as many, or at least we haven't seen any, I don't think, of those unnecessary roughness plays.
Yes.
That we saw a few weeks back playing Cheltenham. That may have been the conditions.
I think it was just, it
may have been kind of the mood, the feeling,
Right. It was wet conditions, and also it's Cheltenham, so, who doesn't want to get a few cheap shots?
Exactly. Now moving on to this week's second round matchup, the Colonials will take on Bayard Rustin. Here's a little recap at Rustin's season. They started off playing Henderson. They beat them 51-38. Then they take on East, which they beat 32-15. They then go on to play Kennet with a win, 38-0. And then they played Chichester with a win, 49-9. They've been on a win streak so far. Then they get stopped by Coatesville, 28-0. Wow. Following week, they take on Oxford, 42-19 with a Bayard win. After that, they play Sun Valley, 43-8. Rustin leaves with the win. And then after that, they play Great Valley, 41-10 with the win for Rustin once more. Then they beat Unionville, 44-14. They beat Chichester again, 35-10, which then takes us to this week. Rustin sits at 9-1, 7-0 in their conference, 3-0 away, 6-1 away, and 3-0 at home.
Yeah, I think another important thing to add there is they average a 3-point first quarter, a 6-point second, a 21.5-point third, and a 7-point fourth quarter. So right now, looking at the money line here, so to speak, Bayard Rustin's supposed to come out on top by 1.2 points, 37.5 to 36 and a third. The Colonials have more of a spaced out, scoring regimen, so to speak, averaging about anywhere from 11 to 12 points per quarter. So that's why I think if the game does get tight, they can, turn it on a little bit and score, more than they have predicted to average. Just that 21-point third quarter is ridiculous. Just the fact that they're able to come out of the locker room. I'm guessing, Davin, that they probably, this is all by chance, but they get the ball to start the second half. I think that's probably the only way they do this, right?
Yeah, that's been shown even with the Colonials. Every time they're able to receive in the second half, I've seen this plenty, especially against Wissahickon. They'll try to get possession at the end of the second quarter.
Right.
They'll try to get the ball as downfield as possible and get a touchdown.
Yeah.
Then next quarter, they get the ball back, get another touchdown. That gives them a huge. That's already a 14-point lead, unless as long as they don't go for 2-point conversions, which is huge for a team like the Colonials, especially if they're facing a tougher team that relies heavy on scoring. As long as you get that big lead, the other team's dead meat. You're not gonna. They're not gonna get as big of a lead unless you fail to convert to first downs, which Colonials have been proven to be successful in.
Yeah. So an interesting thing about Rustin, though, is they kind of play like how the old Colonials used to play. I think they run somewhat of a triple option. I don't know how good their quarterback is, though, but they still have these two running backs. It's not the same two running backs from a few years ago. When they lost at Rustin, those were these like brothers that were going to go play D1 or something. They were ridiculous, but the fact that the Colonials, they were pretty much playing themselves there, right? They knew how to defend that. They knew what was going to happen, but they just missed a ton of tackles. I get they were good running backs, but the fact that they were missing, these jump cuts and, not really going low, is really surprising. I don't know. I forget if you were at that game, but no, I think you were. The week before, or no, 2 or 3 weeks before, that was like that last game of the season. They played Upper Moreland at home in that really amazing game. Remember, where like we come down and score, so like in the fourth quarter, like 5 minutes left. I think it was Orensky who had the ceiling interception. Devin Orensky.
Yes.
Because what happened was we came down, scored, then they came down, and from their own like 25, like the running back was so good, like all the cuts he made, and we just couldn't catch him, and he went down and scored. Then we came down, and Aiden O'Brien diving for the pylon scores it, and just like a ridiculous move, and the call was made on the field and said it was good, and I guess he did get it, but I couldn't really tell from my angle. But then they come down the field, they're looking good. They they run a couple times, but then like 6 seconds left, they got to pass it up, right? And there's Orensky right on the money to pick that off, and that was the game-sealing interception just as time expires. But, it's games like those where you just kind of see historically they've not been good against good running backs. Even last year, you go back to that Upper Dublin game, third-round matchup, and Upper Dublin's first 2 scores were off of big runs by their all-pro running back who went to play D1 somewhere, and then they had this, wide receiver that they recruited, and, he got his. But they got to be ready to make tackles, because if you don't make tackles and give up the big plays, well, just as good as anyone that when you make those huge, 60, 80-yard runs, you're not coming back from that, because you've been doing that to teams all season long. So, yeah, they got that's the big word is making tackles. They got players to make these tackles, but it kills me up in the stands, up in the booth, when I see these guys not going low, because like, you know the game. I mean, you're practicing against these great talented running backs, and you can't make these tackles to save games. And like I said, I'll say it one more time: they have to make tackles to win this game. That's how they're winning this game. It's probably gonna be low scoring. We'll get into predictions later, but they gotta make these tackles.
Yeah, I'm looking at some highlights here.
Yeah,
and
Rustin highlights.
Rustin highlights, and this is against their game against Union.
Sure.
Unionville, I believe.
Yeah, I believe that was their round 1 matchup last week.
Yes, and
divisional opponent.
Their running back is insane.
Rustin's running back.
I mean,
he's good.
I see,
but all they do is run. They don't have nearly the depth the Colonials have, and that's why they're or if they win this week, which I don't think they're going to do, but if they win, they're definitely not making it past the third round, because the Colonials, their downfall in the third round is how they refuse to pass the football. And, so they're an automatic third round exit. This is why I think the Colonials have the best chance to make it to the fourth round for the first time in, like 10 years, is because of their depth to throw the football.
There is this one highlight that I just came across, a 98-yard touchdown run.
Yeah, sounds right.
Their running back. Now,
not surprised.
This play right here looked like the tush push.
They run the tush push.
It's not, but their blocking on their line it looks extremely powerful.
Yeah,
now,
so
I'm not sure the kind of team that Unionville is. I don't know if they're as good as we are. I don't think they are. But the fact that their line looks so powerful and so
Unionville
forceful,
ran the tush push.
No. Rustin.
Sure.
Their line looks so powerful, so forceful. So I'm not sure how good Unionville's line is on
right.
stopping
I
that.
get it.
And Barrett Rustin's running back is able to just slip by and run down that field like Nazai. Like, he looks so athletic. So that's good. That could be a problem. You might want to see some downfield kind of blocking.
Right. So Rustin has some big guys on the line. I think they got a couple tight ends that are like huge, like 6'4", 6'5". I was talking with some players, and they got a good line. They do. But I think how we stop this is, you bring Nazai down, right? To prevent, hopefully prevent that. And honestly, make them throw over the top. I mean, this is the way I look at it. If you just place your defense in weird zones, they're probably scoring 98 yards one way or another, right? Whether it's over the top with a pass, which you'd have to leave crazy wide open, but I trust Chase Smith not to let that up. Or you kind of pack that box and you say, well, okay, you're not going to run it over me at 98 yards. I dare you to throw it. So I think I may just said the same thing twice there, but I think you got to say, if you're going to beat me on that 98-yard touchdown, you got to beat me 98 yards in the air. And if you beat me 98 yards in the air, well, let's just hope we could come down the other way and do the same thing to you. because that's how it's going to be. It's going to be an offensive game, but whoever wins on this defensive end against these two offensive powerhouses that, might I add, have similar offenses, that's who's winning this game.
Yeah, and I think it will come down to, depending on what the Colonials are looking for, it'll come down to, defense. And
absolutely,
also depending on how they want to run it, it could come to very far downfield, safety,
right?
Maybe cornerbacks, or it could come up close, get some defensive end in there, maybe even have one of your guys from the line get up there, get a sack. I think
that would be huge.
If they're really going strong on defense, Tayshaun,
should have a big game.
Kevin Hegarty, they will have huge games if they want to run real up close.
Right.
If they want to run offensively, which I don't think is the best option, then I think Nazai is going to have a field day out there.
Right.
I think that they're going to try to get it to Luke as much as possible. All the guys that we know are so reliable with the ball and that can run as fast and as far as humanly possible.
Right. So what I think is interesting to see is that Colonials have had a couple shutouts this season, and both teams, Rustin and the Colonials, both their losses came in shutouts, each getting at least 20 points scored on them. But Rustin's had a lot of bad teams score points on them. I don't know if it's early or late, but it's the fact that they didn't have the defense to support a shutout. And when the Colonials do, it makes me think the Colonials are probably a stronger defensive team, and they could probably make stops early, whether it's early in the game or late in the game and anything in between. So when we're talking about defense winning games, I think that's got to be a clear indicator that the Colonials have the edge, because they could obviously compete offensively. There's nothing here, before I move to you for a minute, there's nothing on this Rustin score sheet that shows me anything, 51, their season high, 51 points against Henderson when they put up 38, and the Colonials have 56. A couple 35 games, a couple 40, somewhere in the 40s. There's nothing the Colonials haven't done before. And there's no team they haven't played, I don't think, that it's been like, oh, we're coming in with adversity and they win. Like, they've been able to beat the opposition every time. And I haven't seen that from Rustin.
Yeah. Well, I think we should, what Plymouth Whitemarsh here should try to crack down on is the one loss that Rustin had. Actually, I find that Rustin is looking so much like the Colonials looking at their schedule, because you see the one loss they had, they were coming off of a 4-game win streak, and they lose 28-0 to Coatesville, which have a 7-4 record, so it's pretty well balanced,
Right.
But 28-0, that's reminiscent of 21-0 when Quakertown beat the Colonials at home, and then they go on to win every other game after that. So
Coatesville, I believe, is that 6A. I believe they're 6A, which could be alluding to Rustin moving up to 6A. But that'll be a show for another time, I guess.
When we lost that game, we switched quarterbacks, and that was a huge game changer.
Yeah.
Everywhere really, but. Yeah, not all of the roster for Bayard Rustin's uploaded for everyone. No stats are uploaded, so you can't see if there were any quarterback switches or anything, any huge changes to the team. But maybe the Colonials are going to find a way to kind of crack down what happened in that 28-0 loss. Was it defensively based? Was it how do you stop a team that scored 49 points at 30, like over 35 points consistently? How do you stop them from not scoring at all the whole game?
Right. So, Rustin hasn't lost a game since the 29th of September. Colonials haven't lost a game since the 22nd of September. How long can perfection last? We're going to find out Friday night as the hunt for Red November continues here in Plymouth Whitemarsh, Pennsylvania. But before we go, Davin, why don't you lay down a prediction for me?
All right, I gotta really think about this one.
Yeah, this one's tough.
I think Rustin's going to be putting up 35.
Yeah, I was thinking somewhere around there. So, yeah, all right.
But I think I think it'll be 35-49 Colonials.
Oh, that's
top.
That's what I was gonna say. All right, I'll jump in with you on this one too. 49-35 Colonial win. I don't see it going any other way. You know what? Actually, I take that back. I think it's gonna be 42-31 Colonials, because they're gonna. I think Rustin's gonna have to take a field goal somewhere in there. So.
Now, do you think Colonials are gonna have dominance and score the whole game?
Score the whole game?
Yeah.
I don't see.
Aside
that.
From the first drive, where Rustin's gonna have 7 up on them.
Right. So there's no scoreless quarters like we've seen these past couple games where it's like Like, what would you say it was? I think Colonials had 14 first
Yeah,
quarter,
14, 21. Both had 7
and then
in the following quarter. Fourth quarter, scoreless for both teams.
Right. So these are the games where you don't have that anymore. I mean, maybe if there's, I know Chester is supposed to be really good, so if we go on to play them possibly, but yeah, this is the part of the playoffs where you get those really excellent primetime games where you're fighting to the end. And frankly, it starts to look like, collegiate or professional football. You see every play is coming out of the bag, everything you could think of to possibly give your team the edge in the moment. And, Colonials haven't really had that opportunity, as some heartbreaking losses in the third round. So once they get there, whether you're down by 10 or up by 10 in that final couple minutes, any lead can be blown. What God giveth, God may taketh away. So, I strongly believe this coaching staff is going to do everything they can, every last trick play in the book, whatever it is, to pull out this win, because they honestly need it. I mean, I'm ready. I think everyone's ready to see this team get going. And Friday night is going to determine that. That gets them one step closer to the end goal, which is that not only that fourth round, but possibly that championship. And like we've said, teams been proving us wrong here on this show. Let's see if they can finish the job. Friday night, 7 p.m. Be there or be square. Colonials take on RUSTIN at home. A little revenge game. I'm looking forward to it. Take care, everybody, and so long from our high school.